And we're back with the Republican presidential candidate, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Gingrich, the president made a big speech on the Middle East last week. What did you think of it?
I think it is a disaster. I think it is extraordinarily dangerous. I think that defining the 1967 border would be an act of suicide for Israel. They are totally non-defensible. I think for the United States, we don't have moral equivalence here. You have Hamas, which is a terrorist organization whose stated goal is the destruction of Israel. You have a democracy. Now, the idea that somehow we're supposed to be neutral between Hamas and Israel is fundamentally flawed. And I do not believe that we should have any pressure on Israel as long as Hamas's policy is the destruction of Israel. And as long as missiles are being fired into Israel and terrorists are preparing to try to kill Israelis. And I think it is a president who can't control his own border probably shouldn't lecture Israel about their border.
I have to ask you, though, using words like dangerous. I mean, the president was calling for peace. Why can you characterize that as dangerous?
Because how do you have peace with a Hamas organization whose stated goal is the destruction of Israel and driving every Israeli out of the country? I mean, read what Hamas says. This idea that somehow these people are firing missiles virtually every day into Israel. These people are constantly preparing for terrorism. They're recruiting children to be suicide bombers. How can you, the president talks about peace when he ought to be insisting that we cut off all aid to Hamas and isolate Hamas as long as it is a terrorist organization trying to destroy an entire people. I mean, I really think we've got to get over this moral equivalence thing. There is no moral equivalence between a democratic society and a terrorist group.
President talked about President Assad of Syria this week in that speech, and basically he said Assad needs to lead or he needs to move on. What's your response to that?
Well, considering the president's ineffectiveness with Gaddafi, who on March 3rd he said had to go, he seems to be going around picking places to make large pronouncements with small effect. I mean, I think we need a fundamental reassessment of our policy in the whole region. When we give the Pakistanis $20 billion in aid since 9/11, and we learn that bin Laden was not hiding in a cave in the mountains, he was in a fairly large compound in the major military city 1 mile from their National Defense University. That should raise very profound questions about what's going on and how little do we understand the region. When you look at Christians being driven out of Iraq, when you look at Coptic churches being burned in Egypt, I think we really need a much more honest and much more rigorous reappraisal of what's happening in the region.
I have to say, you have not exactly been a model of consistency, especially when it talks about Libya. I think it was on March 3rd when asked what we should do about Libya when all that was breaking out. Here's what you said on Fox News.
What would you do about Libya?
Exercise a no-fly zone this evening, communicate to the Libyan military that Gaddafi was gone and that the sooner they switch sides, the more likely they were to survive.
So you said put in a no-fly zone. Then, a few days later, you go on the Today Show and you seem to say just the opposite. Listen to this.
I would not have intervened. I think there were a lot of other ways to affect Gaddafi. I think there are a lot of allies in the region that we could have worked with. I would not have used American and European forces.
What some people say, Mr. Speaker, is that whatever the president said, you would just take the opposite tack there.
Well, if you had taken two other things. On February 22nd, I said on Fox, I think we should use indirect means, covert operations, and our allies in the region. But I don't think we should get involved. On March 3rd, when you're talking about it, the president has now announced grandly, Gaddafi must go. Well, if the president's serious about Gaddafi must go, I said that night, responding to the president, this is what we should do. 2 weeks later, it's clear that it was a total muddle. They had no plan. They had no ideas. The no-fly zone was a joke. Gaddafi wasn't being threatened. And so you're right. As the president zigzags, as an analyst, I was trying to respond to the moment that he's zigzagging. But I think this policy has been a failure. I mean, if you're Assad watching Gaddafi, why do you care what the President of the United States says? Because the President of the United States has been remarkably ineffective in Libya. And I was responding at each stage to what the president said. Now, I believe in the beginning, what I said on February 22nd was really operative, which is don't get directly involved, don't put our prestige on the line, help the people who are rebelling, use local allies like the Moroccans or the Egyptians or the Jordanians or the Iraqis. and have people who speak Arabic doing that. But the president changed the rules. With no planning, with no preparation, on March 3rd, he staked the position in the United States that Gaddafi must go, and then did nothing to make sure that Gaddafi went, except wasted a lot of money and had Americans fecklessly running around not being effective. And they haven't been effective up to now.
Mr. Gingrich, why do you think you ought to be president?
I believe the United States is in the early stages of a huge challenge as a country. And I believe that President Obama is taking us in exactly the wrong direction. We need a program for very dramatically creating jobs. I have one with 5 major tax policies and with deregulation. We need an American energy program, not going to Brazil to praise the Brazilians for drilling offshore and saying we want to be their best customer. We need a program of balancing the federal budget again, which I did 4 times as Speaker in a way that people thought was impossible when it started. We need very large entitlement reform. The largest entitlement reform of our lifetime was welfare reform, which I led as Speaker. 2 out of 3 people went back to work and went to school. So I think we're in a period where we face enormous choices about which kind of country we're going to be. I think Obama's in exactly the wrong direction, and I think a Republican who's actually led the Congress, achieved 4 balanced budgets, achieved economic growth. When I entered, we had 5.6% unemployment. When I left, it was drifting down below 4%. I think I have both a record of real achievement and a record of real choice compared to Obama.
And what about your personal life and your personal behavior? Are people supposed to just put that aside?
No. I think the American people have to look at it and have to decide, first of all, recognizing that I've said I did some things that were wrong. I've had to go to God and ask for forgiveness. I've had to seek reconciliation. They've got to look at who I am now. They have to look at my marriage. They have to look at our daughters and our son-in-laws. They have to look at my relationship with our grandchildren. And then they have to decide, am I now a mature person who has in fact come to grips with life and who would be an effective leader at getting this country back with jobs and with lower gasoline prices and with a real American energy plan and with a balanced budget?
And do you think you're that person?
I think I can, with the help of the American people. No one person can do this. But with the help of the American people, as we discovered in Iowa, where we had huge crowds, I do believe it's possible for this country to get that job done, and I think I could help lead the American people in getting that job done.